Hey, improvement nerds. Welcome back to another episode where we dive deep into the art and science of making things better. And today's guest, she's a total force in the world of operational excellence. We're joined by the incredible Karen Martin, president of the Karen Martin Group, global speaker, consultant, and best-selling author of powerhouse books like Clarity First, The Outstanding Organization, and Value Stream Mapping. In this episode, we're tackling the gap between what leaders say they want from improvement and how they actually show up, and why real strategy deployment doesn't come from a binder on the shelf. We get into the mindset, mechanics, and the magic of leadership that truly enables transformation. So whether you're driving, walking the Gemba, or just trying to stay awake through your inbox, buckle up because it's time once again to wage war on bad process. Hey, improvement nerds. Today we are honored. Nope, I should say fired up, to welcome a powerhouse in the world of continuous improvement. She's a best-selling author, a globally respected thought leader, and president of the Karen Martin Group. More than all that, she's someone who doesn't just talk about transformation, she leads it. She rolls up her sleeves, asks the hard questions, and helps organizations close the gap between ambition and execution. So let's get into it. Karen Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Mark Ryan. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on. We're really privileged to have you. We had an opportunity to talk prior to this discussion. When I say fired up, I think we were both fired up. We had a great conversation about what more we could be doing in the realm of CI and what more organizations, or more specifically leadership, could be doing in their CI efforts. So let's begin with talking about leadership that enables and not just endorses improvement. I'll start with a question. What's the biggest disconnect you see between what leaders say they want from improvement and how they show up to support it?
I think the biggest problem is the spectrum of under-delegating improvement all the way to over-delegating improvement. And what I mean by that is I find leaders have a hard time striking the right balance between supporting it and being involved in it. So they can endorse it and they can support it with words and things like that, but they really need to be involved in it. And a lot of leaders feel like they should not need to be involved in it because that's the job of the people that are making the improvement. But being involved doesn't mean that they're necessarily doing mapping and things like that. But it means showing up at briefings. It means talking with whoever's facilitating on a regular basis to see how the progress is. It means looking and being a part of creating a charter, assuming that there's a charter being used up front. It means looking at a project plan if it's a longer term improvement project and making sure that the plan is on target and all of those things. And it also means, in a nice way, demanding accountability in terms of quantification and metrics and making sure that they're being a coach and leader to the teams that may be either afraid of quantification or unfamiliar with it. They may even need to build capabilities in it. So that leader needs to be very engaged, not doing it, but supporting it in an action way, not just words.
Yeah, so it's a real delicate balance there to not be overly involved, but not be too far removed from it, and to really understand when to interject and when to kind of push the team and know what to ask from the teams.
Yeah. And I think that this whole idea of clarifications, as you know, I'm a fan of clarity. Clarity first and always. A leader's job is to help translate what the need is, what the business need is, to something that everyone understands. And oftentimes there are these vague needs and vague goals given to a team, and then you get vague results. Clarity is the key to getting precisely what you need and what you're asking for. So that clarification and scoping, making sure that they're not out solving world hunger when, we just need to handle this one country's supply chain with food. It's a problem. Yeah, that type of thing. That it's critical.
If there's a process improvement team or operational excellence team out there, and they're trying to bridge that gap between the folks that are doing the work and the senior leadership, what advice would you give them to close that gap between them and create more continuity and connectivity between those two groups if that doesn't already exist?
It's a little situational because every gap is slightly different. But a couple of things that can help a lot is, first of all, just having a frank conversation about what the facilitator believes is the need of that senior leader. What do they want them to do? What do they want them to not do? A lot of people are afraid to coach up, but I mean, a lot of leaders don't really know what they're supposed to do. And because they've been in these positions where there is a tendency to over delegate or under delegate, it's hard to know where is that sweet spot where they should actually land. So talking up front about everyone's role and what everyone is supposed to be doing at every stage of improvement or not doing is critical. And then the next thing is just making sure that that facilitator is touching base with the leader on an incredibly regular basis. So if it's only a 3-day event, it might be once a day. If it's a 4-week project, then it might be twice a week. But keeping that leader engaged and sharing with them what's happening also helps educate the leader on how the organization absorbs change and how they handle different obstacles that come their way. And you may need that leader to intervene, actually. And a lot of leaders think that they should be completely hands off, but no. I mean, there are times when, as a facilitator, I am certainly not the person to deal with a specific situation that has arisen. It is a leader that needs to come in and deal with whatever it might be. So that keeping engaged, I have a saying, if you want people to engage, you must engage them. That's so true. You have to engage the people you want engaged.
So I like that. It's just contracting basically up front between your leadership to say, this is the support that we need from you. And you said sometimes people don't know how to coach upwards. And one piece of advice I got a long time ago was, why not just even ask the leadership or the people within leadership, is it okay for me to coach you? And that opens the door for future opportunities to do that.
Absolutely. That's good advice you got. And asking permission anytime you're going to be giving anyone some suggestions of things that they should do, or you're even course correcting a little bit or suggesting some ways to see a situation differently, asking permission is great. Really good.
So in your view, what makes for a truly engaged executive sponsor, and how do you build that relationship up?
Again, I think it comes back to how you're approaching improvement in the first place. And those conversations become critical. Involvement in the charter formation becomes critical. That ongoing contact with the leader during improvement is critical. You and I were talking about another thing that's kind of tangential to this, but it's kind of like the alignment problem that organizations get. It sometimes is that the leader has one idea of what improvement should be. There may be another part of the company that has a similar concern about a similar area or problem that they see, but they may have a little slightly different take on it, or there might even be another plan. And I've seen conflicting plans with the same need identified, but two very different paths to solving it. And just getting that leader to be the collector of the various stories that are being told, and then the final voice, and getting to that place of a final voice, no matter what they have to do. They might need to talk to these 4 different pieces of the company and see, what's the real need and get people aligned. It could be the facilitator if they're a strong facilitator, but the executive sponsor has a responsibility for giving the facilitator clear messages and clear direction on what is needed and why.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not asking you this because it's actually happened to me. I'm just asking for fun.
You're asking for a friend.
I'm asking for a friend. Let's say there's an executive sponsor that's really wanting to do a certain project within the organization. And then there's a switch in the executive sponsor, and a new one comes in with a different vision. And the friend is stuck there between the two and just wondering what they should do.
I don't know that I've run into that per se. I've run into it as a facilitator of a full transformation and leadership changes, and they always have different goals that they're going after. And you just have to pivot. You have to pivot with grace, and you have to pivot with a lot of communication with the teams that have been working one way and now have to pivot another way. I always challenge the pivot. I'll ask the new leader, or I'll explain what kind of path the teams or team or individuals have already been on, and say, we can pull the plug. The question is, should we pull the plug? And what do you think, given where you want to go? Is there a way to maybe bridge the gap between where we have been heading and where you want to head, where we don't just pull the plug completely? It's like a problem solving session with that new leader. And most leaders respond pretty well to that. A couple are like, I want what I want and I want it how I like it. So, but most of the time they understand that they're disrupting the apple cart, and most of them want to be responsible with that I've run across.
Is there anything else that you would add as far as leadership goes and getting the leadership buy-in? That just tends to be a big topic whenever we're talking about deployment efforts within organizations and just getting them involved. Is there any tips, tricks, or techniques that you have to get their buy-in if they're not already bought in?
Well, so I'm a big fan of and believer in strategy deployment at an organization level. And that right there is the plan for the year. Ideally, a fiscal year. It doesn't have to be, or it doesn't even have to be a full year, but whatever the time period is, those are the priorities that the entire senior leadership team have agreed are the priorities. And if anything comes in that shifts those priorities, there needs to be a consensus or re-consensus gained from the full leadership team that now these are the priorities. And those shifts should be rare. It should only be when things very unpredictable, very sudden, coming out of left field, where either you'd be a fool to walk away from an opportunity or you'd be a fool to continue down the same path because of some external condition that's shifting. But that alignment is critical. I mean, organizations, I read about this a lot, about chaos and what causes organizations to not succeed and to not get the results they're looking for. And most of the time, it's just all this switching back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and never getting alignment on what really matters and what matters now. And strategy deployment done well is what can achieve that for a company or organization.
I'm glad you brought up strategy deployment. And we have seen the same thing. There's oftentimes organizations are looking at too many things. And if you look at everything, you focus on nothing.
Right.
It's hard to get lift in anything you do in that situation.
And fewer things at once is often the way. It's not fewer things, it's fewer things at once.
Right.
I mean, it might be fewer things, but it's not necessarily fewer things. It's fewer things at once, so that people have greater bandwidth to focus on getting things done and getting them done well. Wrap it, put the ribbon on the package, and then move to the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. And you can get 25 to 50% more results and work done and projects closed in the same amount of time with the same number of resources if you just do fewer things at once. It's so simple.
I think just limit the whip.
Limit the whip. Exactly.
Yeah. So many organizations claim to be aligned with their daily work, or their daily work would suggest otherwise, right? They say we're aligned, but what they're actually doing is not driving their strategy at all. So how can teams ensure that their improvement efforts are truly reflecting their strategic priorities?
Well, that's leadership's job, and leadership at all levels need to be aligned. So it's one thing to get senior executives all aligned on what the priorities are, and then see at the supervisory level that they're not aligned. And sometimes organizations often do a fairly poor job at clearly explaining what the priorities are, and people misinterpret what a leader is saying. We need this. They may misinterpret it to mean, blah, blah, blah. And then, someone else can hear the exact same thing and say, no, I think it means they want this. And so that clarity has to come from the top. Now, that clarity needs to bubble down to the people that are closer to the work being improved. And if there's misalignment between those folks, someone needs to bubble that right back up to senior leaders. I mean, again, facilitators allow themselves to get into the position far too often, of needing to be the arbitrator or the mediator between two sides. That is not a facilitator's job. Their job is to execute a clear mission and help a team get results. Their job isn't to become the leadership team. Their job could be to raise the issue to the senior leadership team and help the leadership team understand why you need them to get aligned and get clearer and communicate more clearly and all those things. But I say this all the time to people: that's not your job. That's not your job to decide what the priorities are. It's your job to help the leadership team and enable them so that they will be able to clarify what the priorities are.
That's great. And do you think that part of that clarification for the priorities is maybe attaching a priority to a key performance metric that can be tracked?
It helps. I'm not a big believer that every single priority needs to have a unique key performance indicator. For example, if you want to improve profit, there are so many different things that you could be doing all in the spirit of improving profit. If you want to improve quality, same thing. So I'm not a line for line, one for one, kind of gal with a KPI and a priority. But I do think I just released our first of 2 quantification courses, quantifying improvement. And I say it a couple times and I'll say it again in part 2, that it's important to always quantify improvement, always. It can't just feel better. It needs to be measurably better, or leadership simply won't take it seriously, nor should they. If you can't show what the improvement is, it's very difficult for anyone to take it seriously. And then one more thing I want to add to this that you mentioned in the very beginning of this section we're talking about right now is daily management and daily work. So I'm not a big fan of believing that everything from the least little bit of improvement or the tiniest little improvement that a frontline person or team is doing, that it has to tie directly to one of these big, high-level strategic priorities. I mean, they almost all do. Like almost everything you can do at a micro level affects something at the macro level. But I don't like to see people spending a lot of time doing mental gymnastics to make the tie. And then leaders often, and I walk into these situations a lot with clients where they've kind of been struggling, and leaders will say, well, this doesn't make any sense. Well, it's because they meaning the front lines and supervisor, middle manager level, have been thinking that they need to do the mental gymnastics in order for anything to be valued. But what happens is it starts feeling like smoke and mirrors, because it is a long leap between a tiny little improvement in the front lines that's absolutely necessary. Mm-hmm. But, a tiny little improvement in the front lines isn't going to create a $5 million savings necessarily. It might, but it might not. And it doesn't mean it's not valued and a good thing to do it, but it just means that, it's hard to, cause and effect. When the effect is so big and the cause is so little, it's hard to make those two match.
I would say especially early journey, as you try to get folks just engaging with improvement, it's hard to say, well, your improvement, it must tie to this specific KPI. It must be this much money or time or effort, but it's really just, how can you improve something? And let's get you involved with the improvement process. And then as you mature in that, maybe it's going to start connecting more into the bigger priorities and strategies that the organization has.
Yeah, I like that beginning. I also think that it creates a lot of momentum when the very first thing that you start on, and it doesn't need to be long lived, but the very first thing is, fix what's painful and start getting immediate relief. And that certainly fulfills the what's in it for me question. Getting people excited about improvement is the first step.
Absolutely. For the organizations that are doing strategic deployment well, what are the indicators that we see with the frontline staff to suggest that it is sticking, that it is working more than just visual management or an information radiator somewhere? How would you gauge that the strategic plan or deployment is working?
When we do strategic deployment, we're typically not looking at what the front lines are doing necessarily. We're working with the senior leadership team, and they have regular meetings with the core team of senior leaders to monitor the plan, the actual deployment plan of the strategy. And that plan is a good plan. It has line items, it has owners assigned, it has due dates on it, it has a Gantt-ish chart, not a precise one, but a Gantt chart that's high level. It's got progress visuals for showing progress, if it's on target or not. And that leadership team is going through that plan religiously. And sometimes it's every 2 weeks to start. Then it might be able to move to monthly, but most of the time monthly is a little too infrequent for an organization new to strategy deployment. Normally, every 2 weeks is pretty much what they need to do. And that meeting is only to focus on the strategy deployment plan, nothing else. Or if it's going to be in a bigger meeting, then they have to dedicate and be super disciplined that they're dedicating the time needed to manage that plan. And managing that plan has a lot of components.
Is there anything else that you would add to strategy, planning, and deployment?
So one of the things that we do that has been game changing for us, as facilitators and for our clients, is inserting this thing I call extra effort inventory. We listen to success stories like Toyota, for example, and how they handle strategy deployment. Well, Toyota grew up with strategy deployment. Same thing with the Danaher companies, and same thing with all the people that have risen to a top level because they've been at it for 10 or 15 years. You go into those companies and they're not starting from the same place that the bulk of the companies that we work with are, which is nothing. They haven't done it before, So this is, they're learning a new skill set and a new way of thinking and a new behavior. They're forming new habits. So what happens is that if you go in and you just try to do the plan and that's it, there's all this extra noise that's in the background of all these projects that are already in play, already in queue, maybe just about to wrap, but there's all this other stuff going on. And they'll make the plan to include what you think you did in, we'll say, a fiscal year, but that doesn't account for everything. The train's already left the station and there's a lot of cars on that train, and it's taken out the whole workforce down with them. And so we do this extra effort inventory for leaders to get very, very clear on what bandwidth there is available, which is usually nothing. At the end of the day, when you look at everything going on, especially if their operations aren't super efficient yet, there's a lot of extra time being taken up in just daily providing value to customers. They have to pull the plug on some things or at least challenge how they're going to possibly get all these priorities done. And we have these very tough love conversations with clients about, no, you already have all these things going on. There's no way you're going to be able to do this full list. There's no way. In one fiscal year, you just don't have the bandwidth. And, they fight and and resist. And I don't mean like fight, like fist fights or anything, but, they don't want to say no or not yet to anything. And I'm like, you've got to, I'm pretty tough love Karen in those moments where it's like, you've got to, you're not going to get it done. And then sometimes I'll finally say, okay, you don't want to say no or not yet to anything. And then you want to endorse this plan. And this is your plan you're going to go with. Let's see how it goes. And then, we see how it goes. And then they'll go, okay, now we see.
Yeah, they're overwhelmed.
Yeah. But an extra inventory step is so important and it's really helpful.
The art of deselecting.
Yeah. Yeah. And being realistic and not pulling in the sky. And, the further away you are from the front lines, the harder it is to remember how long it takes to do everything when you're making an improvement. And also, if you want to develop people while you're making an improvement and not just have some consultants come in and do for the company, then that learning curve takes a little bit of effort and time too.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things that we talked about in our previous conversation was standard work or the lack of it. So the struggle of why are companies really even using standard work, or why do so many organizations struggle to implement or sustain standard work, even though they know it's essential? So what is your take on standard work?
Why do people have a regular habit of eating fried food? Why do people not work out? Why do people drink ridiculous amounts of coffee every day? It's human nature to resist the very thing that can be helpful. It's one of the mysteries of life. I don't think any of us are ever going to figure it out, but there are things you can do to get people willing to try it and see how incredibly valuable it is. So we're obsessed with standard work and we have an obsession with it in TKMG Academy. And I have every single day of my life, I personally look at standard work because something new comes up or something I haven't done in a while, or there's something, and I'm following the steps and looking at the images and the drawings and things like that. And we are tweaking our standard work every single week without fail, often multiple pieces of standard work. So we don't have to be sold. For those that need to be sold, then there's a couple things that I recommend. One is if they feel like standard work is going to put, handcuffs on them or shackles or whatever it is, then I often will say things like, look, it's not in cement. You're not going to go to jail if you violate standard work. What you want to do is look at why are you violating standard work? What conditions have arisen possibly that haven't been considered before? And maybe you need to change the standard work and tweak it to meet these new conditions. Or maybe the standard work is overly simplistic and it doesn't include, in this scenario, you do it this way. In this scenario, you do it this way. It has to be situational and do the work that makes sense for whatever conditions you're dealing with. And then the other thing that happens a lot is people will say, well, it just takes so much time. It does. When we start here with a brand new standard work for a brand new process we've never had before, it can take us a week to get it all the way in place, but that's not full time. That's someone putting their head down for a couple hours and then shoving it out to the team to test. And then we test and then we go, well, this wasn't super clear. I think it's missing this step. And you're doing it. So it does take time, but man, oh man, the work is so fast after that because no one has to guess. It's super fast to onboard new hires. The work is done consistently. It's meeting standards over and over and over that we have preset. And it's just so good. And so I used to only have client work to look at where it worked well and where it didn't work well. But now I have my own living lab. And I mean, to operate without standard work and checklists galore, I just don't get it. But, it isn't the most common way of thinking. But, once people get a good taste of it being done well, it's pretty addictive.
Yeah. And it's wild. There's so many lean tools that are out there, especially ones that Toyota has used that people want to just emulate and take within their organization. And it's shiny and pretty, but they often overlook the standard work component. I remember in my early journey, when I was learning lean, I was engaged with a company that was creating standard work, and we were creating standard work for a work cell, and there was 4 of us, and it took us 4 months to document the work that was going on within this one work cell. So we would do the time studies, we would break out the work steps, we would actually draw pictures of the pictures that we wanted to take so that we were being thoughtful in that process. And it was a long time to build that standard work. And we had to do it all in pencil. But when it was completed and documented, what we were able to do was then take that to grand openings of other stores and provide new hires with this very well documented work and be able to train and coach people to it. And our uptime to go live or open the store, the time was so truncated. It's unbelievable. And the employees really appreciated that. So like you said, when you see it working and you see it working well, there's nothing like it.
Nothing like it. I can't agree more. We used to take us 2 to 3 days to launch a new course, and we changed our standard work every single time we had a course launch because we were experimenting. We were saying, hey, let's try this. That seemed to be kind of clunky the last time. Let's try it this way. And we've tried so many things. And then we'd update the standard work and the checklist that we have. And we just launched course 28, and we launch our courses now in hours. And it's just gotten so much more elegant, but you can't get from days to hours without really paying attention and experimenting and trying new things. And, it's fun to experiment. It doesn't always work, but you learn from it not working, so it's just, it has to be part of the job that you're doing that as part of the job. You're working both on the business and in the business.
Yeah. And without it, you don't know if you're really improving without having a standard. So you could be making changes, but they're just lateral changes and you're just going back and forth. So having that standard to grade yourself by, I think it's good.
Yep. It's a good thing.
All right. Let's talk about coaching or the lack of coaching or creating coaching that creates change. What does high quality coaching look like in the context of improvement, and why is it so often missing?
Okay. Well, you've hit my sensitive spot here. So I love the question, and I have a lot of experience watching coaching not be very strong. And here's the thing that I hope every single listener pays attention to. Truly, you can't have people coaching others that don't know how to do the work really, really well themselves. You wouldn't hire a piano teacher to teach your children how to play piano or teach yourself how to play piano if the only thing they could play are chopsticks. You would not do that. Same with learning a sport. You wouldn't hire a golf coach that could barely putt. So people fancy themselves as excellent problem solvers because they're human. But humanity does not make for an excellent problem solver. A structured approach, a scientific way of thinking is what makes an excellent problem solver. And that can be taught to pretty much anyone, but it has to be taught and it has to become a habit and it has to be kind of move into the DNA of a person to become a really good problem solver. And so I see so many people out there with the role of coach that haven't even been through even one problem solving cycle with a skilled coach, making sure that they're really good at catching themselves operating with a bias, or, that they're leaping to a solution, or that they're skipping root cause analysis, or any of the things that are not good problem solving. Somebody with skill has to be the one detecting it. We're terrible at detecting our own stuff. And so I don't know how this happened, that people started thinking that you could put the chopsticks piano teacher in front of a bunch of students to learn how to be virtuoso, pianists. But it has happened and it's tragic. And the level of proficiency that a coach has in problem solving themselves is the highest level you can get in the coachee. So that's the thing to remember, is it's the highest level. So what organizations have to do, and it's a little bit of a slower path, but it's not a significantly slower path, is have very skilled coaching, teaching people that have already been through really good problem solving. So either they've been coached by someone external or internal, they're already really good at problem solving. And then you teach them how to coach. So there's, the Toyota kata, there's like the two katas, there's the improvement kata and the coaching kata. Totally agree. They're two different skill sets and you have to be good at both. And so, you get one coach that coaching 3 people. After 3 cycles of problem solving, given good coaching, those 3 people can then become a coach. And then they go through 3 cycles of the people they're coaching. And then those people can coach 3. The power of 3, it's just always been a really good thing. In my view, you can't have them solve one problem. That's only one problem. It's only one set of root causes. It's only one type of countermeasure or countermeasures that you're putting in place. So they have to have variety to become really good at problem solving. And then you have to layer on the problem solving coaching skill set on top of it. So yeah, it's tragic. I mean, really, what I see going on out there is not good.
Yeah. To the chopsticks analogy, it's exponential. If you have a piano teacher that's teaching a class and the students are only learning chopsticks, then all the students will ever teach anybody is chopsticks. So then that spreads. So you grow up and there's a piano and do you know how to play? So, yeah, I know how to play. And you just start playing chopsticks and it's almost something that and that you were taught. So it's not really developing capability for problem solving, like you said, actually going through it or having a good model.
Well, there's so much of the Dunning-Kruger syndrome out there where people think they're more proficient than they are. And again, I think there's this really weird bias that because people are humans, they can solve problems. But yeah, that's just not true. Yes, like it can be developed for sure. And it doesn't even take that long to develop it. Someone who likes to think, they are especially fast at becoming a really great problem solver. And depending on what their academic preparation has been, they might have been in a major that's more likely to make them, a more critical thinker than not, So there's all that, but people just should not be in coaching roles until they've proven that they are really, really good at problem solving.
Absolutely. Yep. Just as we wrap up here with our podcast, a couple questions for you. What's something that you've changed your mind about in your own improvement journey?
Value stream mapping is the topic. So I used to be pretty by the book on the only reason to look at the value stream is to improve it. And the only reason to enter into mapping is to develop the current state and then lead right into a future state design. And then I had a series of several clients in a row that said, we don't want to do future state yet. We want to stop at current state. And I was like, what? what could you do that? Like, why would you not want to take it to this, better place? And they were like, "Yeah, we just want to understand value streams. We just want to understand our current state. We just want to get people aligned and see the world through the same lens." And I just felt like it was such a loss to not take it all the way to improvement. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was such a gain. It was such a gain for all these functional leaders to finally see the world through the same lens. And I always say, when you've got a whole leadership team and not one person can describe with any level of accuracy, even at a super high level, the way value is delivered to a customer, that's a problem. How do you make good decisions? How do you budget appropriately? How do you know what the priorities should be? How do you understand your customers if you don't know that? So it's really, really helpful to at least start with that current state understanding, and then, hopefully get motivated to do something about it and design and then implement the improved state. But wow, I mean, that was huge for me to turn on that one.
Yeah, it's so important. I remember working in an organization and being in a value stream with a bunch of connected processes or departments, and we would do walks, and there would be areas that would be optimized and celebrations that would happen, but yet the value stream would be sub-optimized because of that optimization. And they didn't realize the impact that it would have to the total value stream.
Yeah, I lived it. It used to be way back in the day. I was a laboratory technologist and did, blood work. And we worked really hard in several settings I was in to get the results out more quickly, because especially the emergency departments were just always like, "Come on, we need these results." And so we did these great jobs, and the technology helped by moving from larger equipment to smaller equipment so you could do smaller batches and things like that. And yet patients weren't getting out of the EDs any sooner. And it wasn't until I became a lean person and going in and working with clients and a lot of healthcare clients that I started seeing that it didn't matter how fast the results got out if they weren't attached to action in the ED once the results landed there. And so that's exactly what you just said. It's like that's sub-optimization. It's good work and you do want to celebrate it, but if it doesn't really impact the value to the customer and the speed and quality of it, I'm not sure that that's where I would spend my time.
So if you had the mic in front of a full room of improvement professionals and you could give them one piece of advice to close the gap between good intent and great impact, what would you say?
Quantify, 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 quantify. Learn how to quantify. Learn how to sell result. It's not sleazy. It's not arrogant. It's not boastful. It's what you need to do to get people to see what the improvement is doing for the organization and wanting more.
And when you're done that, quantify.
Quantify. And we've got 2 courses on that.
Nice. Yes, you have courses. And speaking of value stream, you've written a book on it. You've written many books. How can we catch you or find out what you're doing, or what would you like to promote here on this podcast?
Okay, so there's a couple things. One would be LinkedIn, and my personal LinkedIn is Karen Martin OpEx. And then our academy page is TKMG. So I used to be the Karen Martin Group, and now I'm TKMG. So TKMG-Academy is our LinkedIn business page. And then our website is tkmgacademy.com. And you can get back and forth between our consulting site and the academy just on the menu. They both have a reference to the other.
Nice. And I would encourage everyone to check it out. We'll also place links in our socials with our podcast. Karen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. You've had a big influence on me. Thank you for joining the Improvement Nerd team and hanging out with us. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. It was a great conversation. You asked really good questions. These are the important questions that everybody should be asking, really. These are really good questions. Thank you.
And that's a wrap, Improvement Nerds. Huge thanks to Karen Martin for sharing such thoughtful insight and challenging us to think differently about leadership, alignment, and what it really takes to drive meaningful improvement. If you want to learn more about Karen and her work, be sure to check out the links in the episode description and comments. If this episode's got your wheels turning, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with another improvement nerd in your network. We'll catch you next time. Until then, keep improving, stay curious, and remember to leave your processes better than you found them.